All right, welcome to another coffee tasting. Today we have two coffees as part of our fall festival duo. So we released these two coffees. You can get them in a bundle or you can get them individually. And these are coffees from Regalia and Onyx. So I'm going to go and talk a little bit about each of them. We're going to taste them, and we suggest you taste these coffees side by side. So I have 2 cups. We're going to brew these back to back and talk a little bit about what to look for in the cup and have fun tasting them. Let's now go over the coffee. So we have 2 different coffees, one from Regalia, one from Onyx. The first coffee is Victor Calderon. This is a single origin washed Guatemalan coffee, Bourbon and Caturra, and it has flavor notes of orange zest, nougat, sweet apple, and chocolate. And our next coffee is our coffee from Onyx, which is Montana Congolan, with flavor notes of yellow pear, brown sugar, almond, and milk chocolate. This is a washed Honduras coffee, also single origin. Varietals are Bourbon, Caturra, and Catuai. So those are the 2 coffees, and we may have noticed we have very different flavor notes between the 2. And also the roast levels are a little different between the 2. So we have one that is a very light roast and the other that is, I would classify this more of a medium roast. 2 different expressions of coffees that we think pair really well for the holidays, mainly Thanksgiving. So let's go ahead and brew these coffees and, well, give them a taste. That's always the fun part. I'm going to start with this Regalia, and then I'm going to then start with the Onyx. Always fun to open up a new pack of X-Pods, especially for the video. Smells nice. So this coffee is a light roast. It smells nice. I get actually a lot of this nougat and chocolate smell of this coffee. But I do think once this coffee cools down, we're going to get a lot more of those louder, fruitier notes in the coffee. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to brew this one first, and then we'll go and brew this one right after, and we'll try to taste them side by side. Scan here at the top. So this is grind size 70, ratio 17. And of course, we can go and look at the recipes after we brew these two and talk a little bit about the recipes. I always find it fun to smell the coffees as they're brewed. While that's going, let's open up this Onyx. Very different aromatics. So despite this being a 1:17 ratio brew, you can see, look at how dark that's looking. That is, I'm very excited to see what type of notes we're going to be able to pull out of here. And also, this is a light roast coffee that has a chocolate note in it. So we may end up with something like a milk chocolate effect or maybe a milk chocolate sweetness, and it should pair very well with this Onyx, which is going to be a little more developed. It is, I would classify this more of a medium roast. So very different expressions of roasting styles. And of course, these coffees are very different. Ooh, that smells really nice. Okay, I'm gonna pour some of that in there. Now let's brew the Onyx. Do a little side-by-side tasting. So here we go, here is the Onyx coffee. If you do look at the coffees, visuals are always kind of tricky to explain because of processing and all of that, but to me this looks slightly darker than the Regalia, so it should have a quite different expression of flavors. Pour that in. Also, the beans themselves smell very different. I would say that the expressions are, I think this is a little heavier, a little more chocolatier of a smell to me. Get that in there. Give it a scan. And here we go. This coffee is also a 1:17 ratio, but you'll see the grind is much finer. That is your chocolate-covered fruit effect right there. And with all of these coffees, while this is going, I would say let's let your first coffee brew. It doesn't matter what direction you go in. I wanted to do this one first because I think with the lighter roast coffees, some of those nuances need some time to come up into the cup, and that is, well, letting the coffee cool. So here we go. Ooh, that smells really nice. You definitely can smell that the chocolate is a little heavier in here, whereas this would, I would say, whereas the Regalia, when we were brewing it, was a bit more on the lighter end in terms of, not as heavy in terms of chocolate flavors and the smell, at least. All right, this is wrapping up. Also, very darker looking brew, but we can tell, at least just from a visual look, definitely this one looks to me to be a little more of a darker coffee. So these will have incredibly different expressions. The reason why I brewed the Regalia first, at least this is the direction I went in, is because this is a lighter roast coffee and I want things to kind of open up, whereas this one, I think we'll already get a lot of those louder notes or the chocolatier notes as we begin tasting. Let's give them a smell. So here we go. Citrus, sweet, subtle. At the end, it really reminds me of maybe a Twix type of chocolate bar. Here is the Onyx. I want to say a bit nuttier. There is an almond note on this coffee. Nuttier, chocolatier of a smell. Smells to me a little heavier as well, whereas the Regalia is quite subtle in that regard. If you look at the flavor notes, that totally makes sense. So anyway, let's give this a taste. So while this is warm, what does the Regalia taste like? Ooh, wow. It's really upfront citrus. Citrus that kind of goes into this nougat. I mean, these flavor notes are super accurate. Citrus, they're saying orange zest here. To me, it's like a really nice citrus note, but it is really well tied together into this, I would say toffee, nougat, toffee type of flavor note. And then the finish is nice and sweet. I do see where they're getting a chocolate note, because it's kind of like if you've eaten a milk chocolate bar and you're just letting it kind of sit on your palate and melt there. That is the effect I'm getting. But of course, because this is a lighter roast coffee, we're getting some of those inherent acidity qualities, which in this case, I'd say is a citrus flavor note. Here's Onyx. To me, heavier body, chocolate forward. It is like chocolate and brown sugar forward. If you've ever had something like an oat milk latte, or brown sugar oat milk latte, this is pretty close to that. This is actually tasting, to me, this is what that tastes like if I were to think about something that you may have had before. Yeah, totally get this like oat milk, maybe almond milk, latte effect. There's this nice nuttiness that's up front. It has this nice weight to it. So oftentimes you'll hear me talk about acidity. This has this nice weightiness, not of acidity, but of chocolate. This is not a dark roast, so there is still some interesting, pleasant acidity in here. And I think that will come out when the coffee cools down. But yeah, this is fun, right? These two coffees are just awesome coffees. Let's taste the Regalia again now that it's cooled, and we'll taste the Onyx when it is cooled. This is where I would say that citrus, there is, I want to say more of like a apple slice effect going on as well, but still very citrus, maybe a little bit of the apple slice in there as well in terms of acidity. And then still the rest of it to me finishes very toffee-like, nougat in this case, milk chocolate sweetness, like melted milk chocolate to me. It's clean, it's quite subtle. The acidity is definitely something that is very well integrated into the cup here. This is a nice sweet cup of coffee. It is a light roast too. So for a lot of people, they're gonna taste this, and yes, you're gonna get acidity in here, but I do think there are a lot of really nice chocolate, those browner notes in coffee that are in here. And it's gonna be interesting if you've never tasted a light roast like this. You're gonna be like, whoa, I didn't know light roast could taste like that. Now let's taste the Onyx when it's cooled down. It definitely is more chocolate forward. I expected it to have a bit more acidity as it opened up, but to me, it's taken more structure to that almond note, to that chocolate note that is here. The linger on my palate is, I would say, very brown sugar-esque. Maybe at the end you get a little bit of this pear note, but for sure, if you taste these side by side, you will think the Regalia is much louder in terms of acidity. So that's why we decided to get this in as a duo. It's fun to taste these coffees side by side because you get two completely different flavor profiles. And of course, they're from different regions and different roasters and they're different roast levels, but that's the whole point, is that it is super fun to brew these two coffees side by side. I think this Onyx would be really great in something like milk. You could throw some milk in here. It would taste like that almond oat milk latte, even though you're getting this without adding any milk into that. And this Regalia would be actually really nice if you wanted to make something like an iced coffee with it. It has these nice expressive, fruitier notes in here, but with this really nice chocolate sweetness. So two very different presentations of coffee. Now let's talk a little bit about some recipes you can look into. Pour over recipes, not drink recipes, to clarify. Maybe if that's of interest, we can look at making some cool drinks with the X-Bloom at a later date. So let's look at these recipes and we can talk a little bit about adjustments on what you may want to change if you were brewing these coffees. As always, get the X-Bloom app, and what we can do is my phone paired to the machine there. See, I was just brewing without using my phone. What you can do is you can hit here, NFC, import the recipe. Let's look at the Regalia recipe. I'll make some recipe adjustments and I'll put them in the description below for you guys to try if you want to try a different expression of these coffees. We're not going to taste those different recipes on the video, otherwise it's going to get too long, but I will have two different recipes for you all to play with so you can have the same coffee and have a different expression of that coffee. And then you can now taste all the different versions together. But looking at the Regalia recipe, this is a really interesting approach to brewing light roast coffee. This is on the coarser end with longer blooms, with longer brew times for each of these pours, and then there's a fair bit of agitation. So you may look at a lot of our light roast recipes and you might look at it and say, hey, why is this so coarse? 70 or 30 on original, right? Very, very coarse grind size, but it somehow works out. And the recipe that I'm going to make an adjustment for, you'll see it in the description, is going to push the coffee in, I would say, a more acidity forward direction. So it's kind of how, if you've seen how I brew coffee on things like Secret Stash, it is definitely more acidity forward, because I do think there are some interesting, there's this interesting orange and citrus acidity in here that I think could be pulled out. But the way the recipe is set up right now is for this really nice balanced approach where you get a good amount of acidity and you get a good amount of this chocolate, but we of course want to create different dynamics through brewing. So that will be a different recipe I will leave in the description for you. Now let's look at the Onyx recipe. Take your phone and let's look at the Onyx recipe. I think what's quite interesting to me at 1:17 ratio with this Onyx recipe is that there is such large amounts of body. And I think that's just because of the coffee itself, but also this is a nice chocolate profile roasting, really good coffee. And at 1:17 ratio, you would expect there to just not be so much of it because we're adding so much more water. And I think this really speaks to how good this coffee is and the roasting style, right? This is like really good, right? It's a really, really nice, approachable cup. Yeah. So if we look at this recipe, definitely on the finer side. 1:17 ratio, grind size 47. My approach would be slightly different, where I would probably focus on maybe a little bit of a coarser grind with a tighter ratio. But tasting it 1:17, I'm like, whoa, this is really, really good. And it captures all of these inherent qualities of the coffee, which to me is this really nice almond, this really nice chocolate, and there is a little bit of fruitiness at the end, but to me this is more of a chocolate forward coffee. And the recipe I'm going to make an adjustment for, which you'll be able to see, is trying to focus more on that chocolate bit. So different expressions. That's all I really wanted to do today, is just brew these two coffees. There should be some of them left, and a note on these coffees. These coffees were roasted about 2 weeks ago. I think these coffees are going to taste really good in this 4 to 6 week period, especially something like this Regalia, where it's on the lighter end, and this Onyx is tasting just really good. I actually am very excited to see where this Onyx goes in a few weeks, even later from now. So that's all we wanted to go over today. 2 different coffees for our fall duo box. You can get them individually, but depending on what you do, I would suggest you get them both together and try them out side by side, like what we did today. That's all. Thank you so much for spending the time to watch this video. If you have any questions, let us know, and please check out the additional recipes that I linked below for you guys to try and see which one you like better. Hope that was fun. See you guys in the next one.